I think we can get started then with some reports of different projects that are happening. So I'm wondering if our diversity, outreach, and inclusion group can go first, please.
All right.
So they've been meeting sort of over time during these times of with these issues coming to the forefront. We're very, very grateful to them for all the work they've done and the statement we put out that they really crafted, but we worked on it together. It was a wonderful cooperative process. We sent it out yesterday, so if you haven't taken a look at it, I encourage you to look at it. And they are also looking for more members of their group, which I'm sure they'll tell us. So if I think either
so
Mike.
That's me. Yeah. Oh, I'm next to Ron, so we have to like figure out.
Are you going to present, Georgie? Or
sorry, what was that, Ann?
I'm wondering who you're presenting.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see so many of you. So my name is Georgie, for those of you who don't know. I'm speaking on behalf of the Diversity, Outreach, and Inclusion Affinity Group today to share with you our 3 latest very exciting developments. I wrote all this out because I didn't want to forget anything, but I just wanted to say that the DOI was formed early on by members of the BPRG who recognize the exclusionary history of research and translational medicine and who wanted to address these issues by creating space and advocacy for classically marginalized communities within the context of psychedelic research. So I speak for myself here when I say that the triumph of getting these medicines approved for therapeutic use is diminished if it's not done with everyone in mind and if it's not accessible to everyone who could benefit. So the DOI acknowledges the necessity of outreach and action to make the field of psychedelics a diverse and inclusive environment for all. We have worked closely with the BPR leadership, including myself, who also recognizes the importance of our work. And we've been working together with the BPRG since June to draft the solidarity statement that was shared with you all yesterday. Like Ann said, if you haven't already, I encourage you to take a look at the document. So we would also like to open the conversation about the solidarity statement to other members of the BPRG community. And we will be sending out a form for submitting suggestions for edits, additions, or changes to the document. So it's, right now it's a solid draft, but we would love anybody else's input. So just keep an eye out for an email from the DOI or from Mackenzie Bullard for this form. So the solidarity.
It'll probably come from the BPRG because it's easier to send it out that way.
True. Okay. All right. We'll keep an eye out for that form. The solidarity statement was born out of acknowledgement for the police brutality, acts of anti-Black racism, and general awareness of systemic racism that has become so apparent over the last few months. And it's a pledge to prioritize learning about these issues and supporting them to the best of our ability. So in addition to the solidarity statement, members of the DOI group have very thoughtfully curated a list of diverse speakers to present at future BPRG events. And we will continue to work with the BPRG leadership to incorporate these speakers and have plans to dedicate an entire BPRG event sometime in October, haven't settled on a date yet, to 1 or 2 of these proposed speakers with a focus on diversity and inclusion in psychedelic research. Lastly, the DOI has created a document of suggested prompts for all of the BPRG speakers to consider incorporating in their presentations. So these prompts serve as an invitation for speakers to consider matters of research, participant demographics, inclusionary efforts, availability of treatments, and more when sharing their work with the BPRG community. These prompts are intended to be beneficial to the speakers since it's likely that they will be asked about these topics by members of our community at the end of their talk. And it is intended to signal the BPRG's and the DOI's values and commitment to bring awareness to these issues at every level possible. So thank you, everyone. And I encourage everyone who has something to say about the solidarity statement to take advantage of the form that will be going around soon. the DOI and the BPRG leadership truly values everyone's input, no matter how big or small. That's all for today. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Georgie. That's great. And I just do really want to emphasize what a collaborative effort this has been. It's been a really wonderful learning process for me personally, and I think for all of us who've been involved. So I encourage anyone with any interest in this to let us know your thoughts. So thank you, Georgie. So Jeremy Daines with the Credentialing Professional Association Group.
Hey, everyone. Thank you, Anne. So yeah, just a brief couple of minutes to update this group on some of the work that's happened regarding the creation of a professional association. For those that aren't familiar with the effort, briefly, it was identified about a year ago, I think, at Ron and Georgie's house that, hey, there really should be a professional association that can advocate for the practitioners of this work once the work is sanctioned and fully legal. And I stood up at the time along with some other folks and said, okay, yeah, let's do this. Let's make this happen. And so we've been meeting on a more or less regular basis for the last year or so. And those meetings are starting to get more frequent over the last 3 or 4 months because we're arriving now at a place of really crystallizing and making something tangible. So I actually named the group the Professional Association Midwives because we are not the professional association. We are trying to birth it into the world. And we were able to get a coalition of a lot of great folks from around the country. Many names you guys, I'm sure, are familiar with. And some folks from the Midwest, some folks from California. And what we've arrived at and what I wanted to share with you today is that we are ready now to sort of take a next step, which is in the form of actually expanding the inclusion of this effort. And so we made a concerted outreach recently to several groups, many of which I had only heard of for the first time. And I guess I should say just briefly, I'm not a researcher or a practitioner or a therapist. I'm someone who's very passionate about the work, having been healed by it. And so I'm sort of leading this from an administrative perspective. So what we're doing is we're gathering even more folks to really bring this into the world because we recognize that we want to get it right. We want to have the most inclusive and diverse participation as we possibly can. I've sort of said a few times, I was like, man, isn't this an amazing opportunity to actually get this right from the outset and not course correct later? So thus taking the time to really be thoughtful and considerate about the approach. So what's happening is that we're going to be having a pretty large summit meeting of representatives from as many psychedelic research groups and associations as possible. And I'm just going to name a few of them because, again, this could be news to you guys too. So we've invited and people have confirmed that they're going to be coming. Of course, we've got representation from the BPRG. We've got the Yale Psychedelic Science Group, New Haven Psychedelic Society, the Stanford Psychedelic Interest Group, CPTR alumni and cohorts, psychedelic therapists from Chacruna, Polaris, the Sana Healing Collective, Bay Area Integrative Psychiatry, MAPS, of course, Johns Hopkins is involved, and on it goes. So what we really wanted to do was just say, okay, actually, I want to read to you why it is that we did what we did, because I really think this is great. I didn't write this, by the way. This is from Alex, another leader of this effort from Oregon. When we invited the leaders of these various groups that I just outlined, I'm not going to read the whole letter, but I wanted to just talk about, again, the spirit of our mission here. We were sending this invitation not to you, not from a place of authority or with a self-assigned mandate. We are a group of clinicians, including therapists, nurses, and doctors from multiple lineages and professional backgrounds who have been referring to our group as the midwives because we acutely know that this is not our baby. And yet we feel called from a shared recognition that a professional association needs to exist with a shared willingness to do the work to bring it into existence with care, integrity, and broad representation. And so it was with that spirit that we sent out the invitation. And so far we've gotten, a huge response. So we're going to be doing a massive doodle and trying to get probably a Zoom call about this large on the calendar in the next 4 to 6 weeks, because as I said in one of my breakout groups, it's really quite interesting to try to build a professional association for a practice that's not yet legal. So you got to really kind of find the right cadence and timing of when to do what thing. In any case, that's the brief update. Just wanted to give you guys a heads up. I guess my ask of this group would be, certainly if you have any questions or clarification, feel free to reach out to me either via chat on this Zoom for the remainder of today. But my ask would be, if there are research groups or psychedelic associations that you didn't hear, and it wasn't comprehensive, I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time reading every single one, but if there are groups that you guys are aware of in this country that we should be talking to help bring this into the world, please let me know, because we know we don't know everything. So, and that's how I'll end. I don't know everything. Back to you, Anne.
Thank you, Jeremy. It's amazing what you've done in a year. It's really, I remember when you and Leah met a year ago.
Yeah.
Great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Is Dan, is it okay to comment, or?
I think probably not, Dan, because
Yeah.
we have a lot of people to hear from, but
Yeah.
get in touch with Jeremy if you have
Yeah.
questions. Thanks for checking. Hi, Rachel. You just popped up on my screen. Next, Dan Grossman, please, for the contemplative practices and psychedelics.
Hi, everyone. So I co-lead the Contemplative Practice and Psychedelics Affinity group with my friend Ann Dutton. And for now, the group is a forum for anyone interested in the intersection of Eastern contemplative practices with modern psychedelic research and therapy, how they might fit together and how they can inform one another. We met yesterday and have been meeting the day before BPRG meetings for about 90 minutes each time. But yesterday was a discussion led by Chris Germer and Marina Bystritsky on the interface between self-compassion training and psychedelic therapy. Chris and Marina are clinical psychologists and teachers of mindful self-compassion. It was an excellent topic. We had a few people from the Bay Area joining us as well. If you're interested in the general subject area and want to be added to our email list, just let me know. I'll share my email in the comments. That's really all I got for now.
Are you having discussions about how to bring it into research protocols, Dan?
We haven't yet, but that is a really good idea and perhaps something we will touch on in later meetings.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Mark Bates from the DC area, please.
Hello all. I just want to share, I'm struck by the variety of complementary synergistic activities, kind of like magic mycelium that will no doubt fruit in many beautiful ways.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate the time to brief our veteran study. This is an anonymous survey study with veterans who have used psychedelics for healing. For background, I'm a retired military psychologist who went through the CIIS program. And I want to give a shout out to our research team because they've really been working hard. It's been a labor of love to get this study to where it's at. Alan Davis, clinical psychologist from Ohio State University. Katinka Hoyer, medical anthropologist, Medical College of Wisconsin. Robert Kaufman, Bob Kaufman, retired Navy captain, preventive medicine physician and psychiatrist, member of this year's CIIS cohort. Eric Lund, a survey research expert, and Morgan Luttrell, who's a cognition and neuroscience expert with deep military and combat experience. So we have some great synergy going on our research team. The context for this study is that for over 10 years, we've seen extraordinary bipartisan and multi-agency support for veterans' health needs. And there are still significant indicators that we can do better in supporting veteran needs. Just a couple indicators are an average of 17 suicides per day nationally. And second, a JAMA article indicating that up to 2/3 of veterans that receive the evidence-based recommended treatments do not benefit sufficiently. So we just want to join the fight in helping veterans. In addition to the remarkable results being demonstrated by MAPS protocols with PTSD, we have heard anecdotal reports that veterans are taking matters into their own hands and pursuing innovative approaches to healing and experiencing healing far beyond their experiences with mainstream medicine. It also sounds like there's significant variety of drug set and setting factors in these experiences. So from a harm reduction perspective, it's critical that we have a better insight into what factors can best ensure veteran safety and beneficial outcomes. Also, from a health systems perspective, we need to understand more about how these approaches might interact with traditional services, either for beneficial or harmful ways. So our survey will be looking at 3 critical knowledge gaps. One is what psychedelics are being used in what types of settings. A second is what outcomes are veterans experiencing, both harms and benefits. And then third, what factors are associated with harms and benefits. So the survey is built primarily with the briefest versions of psychometrically validated measures of outcomes and predictor variables. The study design also includes a retrospective pre-post assessment of symptoms, so we can engage changes in symptoms in key areas like PTSD, depression, anxiety, and substance misuse. The immediate value of the study includes informing harm reduction products for veterans so we can give them practical information to stay safe and have optimal healing experiences. We also want to inform decision makers and policymakers about the prevalence and patterns of use reported by veterans. In a way, you could think of this study as a way of aggregating the voice of veterans for policymakers about what they're experiencing. And then finally, these studies can help inform future research with veterans on how to tailor research to best support veterans' needs. So along these lines is a participatory research design. In essence, we believe that hearkening the issues about culture and DOI, anytime you're studying a group, you should have representatives of that group as part of your study team. So our slogan is not about us without us. We actually have 10 anonymous veteran advisors for our study. They played a critical role in the study design, giving us exhaustive feedback that led to 20 significant improvements to our survey itself. So they'll be working closely with us throughout the life of this survey through dissemination of the results out to veterans. So since our last update, our study is now fully funded with generous support from the Kamak Family Gift Fund, the Gabriella and Austin Hearst Foundation, and the Boston Psychedelic Research Group. And we are so grateful for this support and trust in what we're doing. And we look forward to giving back in the best results and returns on the investment that we can. This will enable us to give up to 1,000 veteran survey participants $25 to distribute across the veteran and psychedelic nonprofit organizations of their choosing, and to compensate our 10 veteran engagement team members who function as our advisory council. We believe that this form of saying thank you is really important, and it complements our survey participants' sense of service, and it also helps protect their anonymity, because a big part of the anonymity is we're asking people to report on experiences with some substances that are illegal. We also welcome any suggestions from the larger group on nonprofits we could include and the nonprofits we're working with. We plan to actually reach out to nonprofits and let them know about our plan and ask them if they'll help when we're ready to launch the survey. We also, another big accomplishment is we received from NIH an approval for a certificate of confidentiality, which is really important in providing additional protection for veteran survey participants in addition to the anonymous survey participant protocol. So right now we're in the process of validating our survey questions and formatting the Qualtrics survey platform. And we plan to have a survey ready to launch by August. And thank you very much.
Oh, good work.
That's great, Mark. That's very exciting. Thank you, thank you. And pass our best on to Bob. We miss him here today.
Will do. Thanks. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you. So the next person I'm inviting is Yvonne Bosson. And I hope, Yvonne, that this is going to be okay. I put him a little bit on the spot. Yvonne has presented to us regularly about the amazing group that he gathered at the Radcliffe Institute. He's recently finished his fellowship, palliative care fellowship at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. And so, he is now officially a psychedelic therapist and he also did the CPTR course. And he is answering the question of how do I get involved in this work and how can I be a therapist? So I asked him just to tell us, not just, but to tell us his story of how he's gotten here, because so many people would love to be where he is. So thank you, Yvonne. I hope you're on. Oh. Yvonne?
He's on, but his audio is not connected. Oh, now it is. And now he's just muted.
Can you
There we go.
unmute? Yvonne?
Yeah. Can you hear me like that?
Yes. I know you're bashful, but you don't have to be that bashful.
Okay. I think that will work. Thank you so much, Anne. And yes, telling my story. So Anne asked me to tell about my story in 5 minutes. Thank you, Anne.
You can have a few extra if you need more.
Great. No, I'll try to be short, but it's not a small challenge. But I also do think it's a great opportunity to share with you folks and with the community an optimistic story about how the field is evolving and how we can all contribute to moving it forward. So for those who I don't know yet, I'm a French-trained hematologist and palliative care physician. And as Anne said, I graduated from the CIAS certificate in psychedelic assisted therapy and research in 2018 in San Francisco. And it's really good to see some of the CPTR alumni joining the meeting today. I saw several of them, so that's great. And so I just completed this research fellowship in psychosocial oncology and palliative care at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. And I'm now transitioning to an instructor position here to conduct research at the intersection between serious illness care and psychedelic therapies. So how did I get here? So maybe for some of the background, reflecting backwards that I found meaningful is that when I was working in a palliative care unit in France in 2016, the law allowed them, just shifted and allowed then physicians to use profound and continuous sedation until death in terminally ill patients who had refractory, intractable psychological suffering. And so that shift in the law means that our current standard of care does not have answers for a subset of patients who have profound existential distress, loss of meaning and hopelessness that lead them to request that they get put to sleep until they die. And that the only solution we can offer these patients is to make them sleep until they die, or in other countries or states to actively end their lives. So And actually, that's really the tip of the iceberg, because what it highlights is our lack of effective tools to adequately address existential suffering associated with having a serious illness, which exists for most patients and families who are facing this life situation. So that situation in France and elsewhere really contrasted with the remarkable findings that I was reading in the psychedelic research literature, and that were showing therapeutic promise, specifically to address psychosocial and existential suffering in patients with serious illness. So by contrast, instead of numbing symptoms or making people sleep or die, this research was more about helping people awakening by themselves to different perspectives on their experience and situation through the expanded states of consciousness that psychedelics allow, and the therapy, of course. So I was thinking, if psychedelic therapy work, I want to be able to offer this option to my patients. And this means to make them a legal and a standard of care treatment. So from that moment, I started to think about research designs needed to build the necessary evidence that will be practice changing for me and my colleagues. So I was considering doing the research fellowship in Boston and the CPTR training in California. And this is when I met Anne, who is a Harvard physician and who had done the CPTR training. So I asked Anne, which do you think is the best, the fellowship or the CPTR training? And she said both. And I knew she was right. So looking backwards, now I can't emphasize enough how important both these trainings were for me and to be where I am now. The CIS training allows healthcare professionals like me or counselors or spiritual care providers to complement their practice and research focus with an extensive and rigorous training and mentoring program in psychedelic therapy and research. And for me, it allowed me to meet with key stakeholders in the field and develop personal connection with them, to complement my training in hematology, palliative care, and medical ethics with a rigorous knowledge on the medical use of psychedelics. And it allowed me to find collaborators and to create bridges with the psychosocial oncology and palliative care research field. And we are now conducting interdisciplinary research at the intersection of both fields. So I guess I really want to acknowledge the amazing input of colleagues of mine from the Harvard community, such as James Tolsky, Justin Sanders, and Tracy Balmoni, my mentors, and also Zachary Zager and Franklin King, without whom none of this would have been possible. And importantly, as most of you know, we were able to invite last winter folks like Rick Dublin, Bill Richards, Mary Cosimano, Charles Grob, Monica Williams, Tony Bossis, Robin Card Harris, and Manish Agrawal. And to have all these amazing practitioners or researchers discuss with other internationally recognized researchers in the field of palliative care, oncology, and spiritual care during 2 days at the Harvard Radcliffe Institute, and to have them map out really key opportunities and agenda for psychedelic research in patients with serious illness. So today, I and Dr. Sanders and Zager, as well as partners from Hospice Organization in Massachusetts, are working with the Hefter Institute and on designing a psychedelic therapeutic model integrated to hospice care for terminally ill patients. I am also really excited and grateful to be helping Ron and an oncology team in Maryland to develop psychedelic assisted therapies integrated within standards of care in oncology patients. So this is really fantastic evolutions. And finally, I'm working with colleagues here at Dana-Farber on improving measurement tools that will help to assess the effects of psychedelic assisted therapies on spiritual well-being. So I guess I'll stop here, and I thank you for listening to this story. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you're interested to discuss more about that research. We've been working with Mackenzie Buller and others on a potential affinity group on serious illness and end of life and psychedelics through the BPGR. So if you're interested, please come and let us know, how we could work together or think about how to bring that out. I'm sure it's very needed in this field. And yeah, most of all, thank you, Anne, Ron, Dick, Sherry, to bring us together as a community.
Thank you. Beautiful, Yvonne, and congratulations and good luck with all these projects. We'll be cheering you on.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. So I'm actually the next one up. So I have two quick updates. The first, at our last meeting, we were lucky enough to have Bill Richards and Janice Phelps with us. And there was some discussion about how we could try and get the CPTR here to the Boston area. And so I've been in lots of discussions. Sherry's been helping me too, with Janice. And the plan at this point, actually thanks to COVID, is that they're doing the CPTR program now all remotely. So it's much easier to expand it. So it will be run out of, and this is still on the drawing board. So don't quote me too specifically, but what we're hoping for, that's the best way to put it, is to have double the cohort, have half of the cohort be more oriented to the East Coast. And we're hoping by next spring that we'll be able to have at least one in-person retreat gathering. But it will be mostly run through the San Francisco CIAS people. Many thanks to many of you who've reached out to me saying you're interested in being part of this project. And I will keep you updated. I'm still hoping that we'll get a meeting with Janice sometime within the next month or next 2 months, whenever it works for her, to figure out how we best can support her, whether she wants some of us to help with the teaching or just what we can do to help support her, basically doubling the size of the CPTR program. So that's one update. The other, just very quickly, I think most of you know that I've been a MAPS phase 3 therapist, and I just wanted to let people know that over the last month that my therapy partner, Libby Call, and I have done 2 all-day in-person sessions with great help from our participant. We couldn't have done it without her. So we worked as a threesome to come up with a protocol that felt safe for all of us to be together for 9 hours or so. They were beautiful sessions. We feel very, very grateful to have been able to continue the research. And there are other people, another Boston team has started up too and has done or will be doing 2 sessions, their second session. And people are starting up around the country. But anyone who is interested in the mechanics of how we did it, I'm more than willing to talk with them. And want to learn from other people too. I think we all need to learn how we can bring these medicines as quickly as possible to people. And so that would include now ketamine. How are people doing ketamine sessions in this time of COVID? So thank you. And then next, Dick Simon and Franklin King are going to give us an update on the very exciting new Mass General Center.
Great. Thanks, Anne. And am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, great. So yeah, the Mass General Center for the Neuroscience of Psychedelics. A lot of exciting things going on there. We received some initial funding. So we've got a couple of $1 million there from some very generous individuals. And with that, we're able to start, and we've got several studies, and Franklin King will be speaking specifics about the studies. The next exciting thing was on June 15, we had what was originally envisioned as sort of a small, intimate salon. And we got enthusiastic and had tremendous response. So over 200 people responded, and our intimate salon, it said, was a tremendous opportunity to sort of introduce the not yet announced center and the work that's going on there. So, and there's been a lot of interest following up on that. We are now doing every other month or so deep dives with different experts at the center. And we have an upcoming one on July 20th, which is with Bruce Rosen, who will be talking about the imaging work being done there. we are looking for a project director, which is not exactly executive director, but it's got a lot of attributes of it. So if you know of people who are familiar with research and who would be really good in that sort of capacity, that would be fantastic. And since I have the microphone for a moment, I'll also let people know we're on the West Coast. The Psychedelic Science Funders Collaborative is actually looking for 2 people right now, and they've been very, very involved in funding, in helping MAPS with the Capstone campaign and otherwise. So we've been working both with individual donors and have gotten a lot of interest from some industry players in terms of potential studies, and then even more broadly, collaborative opportunities. So that's all going on within MGH. Just to give a sense, there's now a psychedelic research interest group, or PRIG, and that's meeting every month, and over 15 proposed studies have come in from top MGH researchers that are in varying stages of development, some needing funding and the like, but there's been tremendous amount of enthusiasm, and there have been 3, there will be one more, grand rounds at MGH on psychedelics, and Franklin was one of the speakers, and I'll certainly let him speak about that. And then finally, we're doing a really interesting, innovative project being run by Steve Haggerty, who's a molecular biology expert, like grows brains and dishes and all these other things that I can be awed by, but have no idea how you actually do it. Now, it starts with pluripotent stem cells, and your own cells are grown in a dish. And then what happens there in all of these clinical studies that we're doing is we're able to get the benefit of the clinical study at the same time as using the most sophisticated neuroimaging equipment in the world to know what's really going on in the brain from a network standpoint, and actually down to individual cell standpoint. And then ex vivo, or in a petri dish, take a look at that same subject's brain and figure out how they're reacting, why some people react better or less than others, what might be able to be added to a mix that you can't sort of experimentally do on living humans, but you can learn a lot. And then just an exciting project that is coming out that Steve is going to be directing. So Richard Schulte was a Harvard ethnobotanist, and collected in the Amazon over a period of time in the 60s, probably the most extensive collection of plants, psychoactive plants in the Amazon. And one of the projects that we'll be doing is he will be taking a look, because they were originally preserved in formaldehyde, it does some cell damage, but now he's got the science to sort of reconstruct the DNA. So we'll be looking at all of these different substances, none or almost none of which are scheduled. So that's one barrier, and that have all sorts of potential. And, so a lot of exciting stuff going on. And Franklin, who actually does some of this exciting stuff, let me turn it over to Franklin King. And thank you.
Thank you, Dick.
Thanks, Dick. So yeah, I mean, there's been a lot going on at MGH. It's super exciting. I think the last couple of months, despite COVID, really have been sort of catalytic, and a lot of new things have happened. So as Dick alluded to, we basically have softly launched the MGH Center for the Neuroscience of Psychedelics. So we have an organizational structure, we have a scientific advisory board, we have directorship positions within that focusing on specific things. And the basic organizational structure of it is there is a sort of more neuroscience heavy wing within the center. Obviously it's neuroscience focused, but there's also a clinical wing looking more sort of clinical studies. And then there's also an educational component, which is more my wheelhouse. So in that regard, there's 3 studies that are pretty specifically laid out. Again, as Dick alluded to, the things that I'll tell you about are in kind of various stages, mostly of early development, other than the rumination study that I've talked about before here. So the first study is a rumination study looking at psilocybin for rumination specifically within treatment-resistant depression. It's going to be a very neuroimaging heavy study. The second study is also looking at psilocybin for treatment-resistant depression, specifically looking at cognitive and emotional processing. So that's also going to be a neuroimaging study, sort of a markers study. And then the third study is looking at psilocybin to treat personality traits or temperament traits that are associated with development of depression, which I actually think is extremely interesting. And I don't think anyone has actually looked at that. They've looked at it from the other end, finding that psychedelic assisted psychotherapy can change certain personality traits in depressed patients that have been associated with development of depression. This is kind of looking at it from more of a prophylactic standpoint, which is super cool. So some of the folks that are involved in the neuroscience wing, I'll just name them. Dick mentioned Steve Haggerty. So Steve Haggerty is a chemical neuropharmacologist or neuropharmacobiologist. So essentially he grows brains in Petri dishes or grows neural networks in Petri dishes and can expose them to essentially any compound. And what he's really interested in isn't just psilocybin. He's more interested in sort of whole plant products or sort of whole medicine products. So rather than simply look what happens to neural networks when you give it pure elemental psilocybin, what happens if you grind up a mushroom, just take the extract and expose neural tissue to it? What happens if you take, any other mixture that Schultes has stored in the Arboretum, actually, right around the corner from my house, to see what can actually happen. So we're not just looking at the sort of chemicals, we're looking at more sort of from an ethnopharmacological perspective, which is super cool. Bruce Rosen is running the neuroimaging division. So he actually runs the whole neuroimaging division at Mass General. It's way over my head to talk about here, but basically we have a really, really, really big magnet and some special scans that aren't available anywhere else. So that's going to be really cool to see what happens with some of the psilocybin studies. Alongside that, I'll just mention a couple of other specific studies that are really cool. One of them was a study basically taking an evidence-based therapy for PTSD in veterans and trying to integrate in kind of the way Candace Monson and Ann Wagner and some other folks have been doing, integrate in an MDMA therapy session or 2 sessions. So we're developing that. That was actually being done by someone else, and it's for various reasons fallen into my lap. So I'm sort of trying to recalibrate this study. We're probably going to do cognitive processing therapy and have 2 MDMA sessions embedded in the therapy. And we're sort of working with other folks in the field to sort of see what that's going to look like. And then there's also an MDMA therapy for complicated grief that's in very early stages of development. And then there's also some work in the Ketamine Center looking at actually doing ketamine assisted psychotherapy studies, which is cool because I think up until now, the model has been more, I think what most people would consider the more conventional use of ketamine treatment. So all that's going on. And then we're also working with the MGH Psychiatry Academy, which is kind of an educational arm of our department, to create a CME course for physicians and psychiatrists, not just psychiatrists, to basically educate them about psychedelics, to dispel any misconceptions, talk about mechanism of action, risks, people who shouldn't take them, people who might be able to benefit from them, state-of-the-art research, all that kind of stuff. So that's going to be a really exciting product when we deliver that. And then I think we already talked about the Psychedelic Research Interest Group within MGH, which is sort of like growing day by day, just like the BPRG is. It's just sort of this like vertical curve. And then the Grand Round series, which we had 3. We had Charlie Grobe talk a little bit about sort of overview of psychedelics. I delivered a Grand Rounds on psychedelics. And then Rick gave the 3rd one in May, talking about kind of the regulatory process. And all of those were extraordinarily well received. I put that together and was just getting deluged by emails after each one of them. People really enjoyed those. So I think just to sum it up, there's a lot of interest. This has sort of come out from under the rocks at Mass General. A lot of people are aware of it. People are sort of joining on, proposing projects, and it really feels like things are starting to blossom pretty quickly now. So that's what I got.
That's great. Thank you, Franklin. And for people who want to see Franklin's Grand Rounds presentation, we have that video on our website. It's excellent. And maybe Dick will let us put the Mass General one on as well, because that has a lot of...
Yeah, happy to do that. I was actually thinking about that, and I can send around a link and whatever.
Yeah. Well, we can put it on our website, then people can take a look at it. It's very exciting work. Thank you, both of you.